Good afternoon, listeners, and welcome to Get Life Educational Empowerment. That is GITLIFE. Get it together, live in full expectancy. Educational Empowerment on the Awesome Radio Network, broadcasting on WECU 107.5 FM and 1570 AM. If you're watching us live on Awesome Radio, Facebook, or YouTube, welcome back to our viewing family. I'm your host, Sherida Suggs, educator, principal, coach, motivator, and your partner in purpose. As we get it together, today, our message title is Cultural Inclusivity Part 2, Equity and Asset-Based Pedagogy. We'll divide it into what it truly means to see every student's strengths, to honor their culture, and create classrooms where all students belong and thrive. We'll explore how educators, families, students, and communities can partner to bridge gaps, amplify voices, and move from deficit thinking to strength based actions. This is practical, real world empowerment rooted in faith, strength, and a belief that every child has potential that is worth celebrating. So, join us. Let's get it together, live in full expectancy, and empower education like never before. All right, family, let's take a get life moment of love and admiration. With Valentine's Day right around the corner, it is the perfect time to pause and celebrate you. That's right, you. The ones that show up day in and day out for our students, families, and communities. To the educators, leading classrooms and leading lives with intention. To our parents and caregivers, juggling a million roles with love and resilience. To the students, carving out your place in this world, discovering your strengths and claiming your voice. To the mentors, community leaders, and faith partners who show up with guidance, wisdom, and heart, this moment is for you. You are seen and recognized, not just for what you do, but for who you are. You are valued. Your perspective, your care, and your commitment matter. You are essential. Without you, the work of education would not be possible. Every small act counts. Every word of encouragement matters. Every ounce of patience and grace creates ripples that last far beyond the classroom and spills right into our community where we create citizens that thrive. So let this be a reminder today. You make a difference. You create belonging. You inspire growth. And family, we want to take a special moment to honor our school counselors. Last week was National School Counselors Week, and as our calendar moves forward, the gratitude never ends. You are the quiet champions behind the scenes, the ones who guide, the ones who support, and help to uplift students through challenges that we don't always see. You are the key partners on our team, helping students thrive emotionally, socially, and academically. And your impact echoes far beyond the school walls. This Valentine's season, I want you to know that Get Life celebrates you. Get Life Educational Empowerment admires you. And we honor the love that you pour into our students, families, and communities. Stay proud, stay powerful, stay in your purpose because what you give changes lives. And family, that's the kind of love that lasts forever. If you would like to engage more, interact, or be a guest on our show, please email me at getlifeempowerment@gmail.com. That's GITLIFEEMPOWERMENT at gmail.com. Or you can call into the radio station at 252-756-2008 and leave a message if our lines are full. Here at Get It Together Educational Empowerment, we believe in educational abundance, strong schools, strong relationships, strong futures. When we get it together and live in full expectancy, we don't just hope for better, we build better. And family, we thrive together, we grow together, and we are better together. When we talk about equity in education, we cannot do so without hearing the words of our Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King was clear that equality is not just about access, it's about justice. He also warned us that inequality in education leads directly to inequality in society. In fact, Dr. King understood that separate and unequal systems limit opportunity, it silences voices, and reinforces injustice. So, when we talk about equality today, here is the key takeaway for schools, families, and communities. Equality is about fair access to learning. Equality is about high expectations for all students. Equality is about preparing every child to think, lead, and contribute. But Dr. King also helps us to see the limit of equality alone, because getting every child the same thing does not guarantee the same outcome. Our students have different needs. Equality leads us to equity. Equity requires us to respond intentionally to students' different needs, backgrounds, and lived experiences. So, when we honor Dr. King's vision in education, we don't just open the school doors. We make sure that every child can walk through them and thrive once they're inside. That is where cultural inclusivity lives, inside our school walls. So, I want you to carefully understand the difference between equality and equity. Listen closely. Equality means that everyone gets the same thing, whereas equity means everyone gets what they need to thrive. Equity ensures that all students, regardless of race, gender, ability, or background, has access to the tools, resources, and opportunities necessary for success. Remember, we all carry biases, often without realizing it or wanting to admit it. But that does not make anyone bad per se. It just means that we must be mindful, we must be intentional and proactive about truly valuing student strengths and their contributions. It also means that we have to make a conscious effort to be true to what our biases actually are and to overcome them. So, when we think about equity in education, every child deserves challenging, relevant learning experiences, access to resources necessary to thrive, consideration for race, language, gender, socioeconomic background, disabilities, and more. And there are distinctions between equity. We engage in these three areas: multicultural education, social justice in education, and culturally responsive education. So, listeners, viewers, and members, when we talk about equality in education, we cannot do it without honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. He is a visionary and he had a dream. He is a leader that understood that education is not about access only, but it's also about justice. He taught us that equality means opening doors, removing barriers that prevent children from learning, growing, and becoming who they are created to be. Dr. King believed that education should develop both intellectually and within character, because a society cannot thrive only if some of its children are given the tools to think, to lead, and to succeed. Here is the truth that Dr. King also helps us to confront: equality alone is not enough. This is where research gives language to what many educators and families feel in their hearts. I want you to also understand, and we're going to spotlight Dr. Sherida Hammond, who is an African American educator, researcher, and thought leader. She's also an equity and cultural responsive instructor. She helps us to understand that equality isn't a feeling or a slogan, it is a framework for action. According to Dr. Hamilton, when we engage in equity work and when we focus on the three interconnected areas, we also ensure representation, voice, and visibility. We also ensure that we address fairness, bias, and systematic barriers. We also teach in ways that align how students learn best, grounded in culture and neuroscience. Dr. Hamilton reminds us that students don't need to be fixed, systems do. Equity happens when we teach to students' strengths, when we honor their identities, and design learning environments where every child belongs and can achieve. So when we connect Dr. King's dream to today's classrooms, equity becomes the bridge between vision and reality. It is how we turn hope into practice and belief into impact. So let's have a get life, drop the mic moment here. Dr. King showed us the why, equity shows us the how, and culturally, inclusivity is how we make it last. To be truly inclusive, educators must pause and reflect. Are we truly projecting adult expectations onto students because of their appearance or their confidence? Are we holding them to the same standards as younger or differently socialized peers without considering the context of their life experiences? Are we seeing their strengths and potential? Or are we only focused on the behaviors that seem challenging? Remember, during our previous show, we started to examine a hard truth. Dr. Monique W.S. Norris, in her research on Black girls in schools, she talked about the adultification bias, which is how Black girls are perceived as less innocent, more independent, and less in need of nurturing than their peers. This bias leads to disproportionate discipline, missed academic support, and fewer emotional resources. African American girls carry themselves sometimes with adult confidence. Some African American young girls are shaped like adults, but they are still children learning and growing, deserving of nurture, patience, and opportunity, just as everyone else. Inclusivity starts when we take a step back, truly take a step back, reflect, and meet them where they are so that we can meet the needs that they require instead of where we assume that they should be. It means not saying that she's grown. It means not saying, what's wrong with this girl? It's about asking what's already right here and how can we build on it? Because students feel valued when learning is accelerated through meeting their needs. So let's think. When we engage culturally, inclusively, we realize that these students need guidance and respect. Their life experiences can be leveraged as strengths, not as liabilities. We as educators, families, and community leaders must acknowledge our, our unconscious biases and intentionally create spaces where they are supported as the children that they are. So, here are some practical steps for educators to consider. Check your assumptions at the door. Notice when you assume a student can handle something because he or she appears older or they act older. Affirm identity and age. Recognize the maturity that he or she brings, but also provide age appropriate support and care. Leverage strengths. Give leadership opportunities, mentorship roles, and project based tasks that channel the student's maturity level in a positive manner. Communicate with empathy. Ask the students, what support do you need from me in order for you to be successful? And then listen actively and with care. So let's keep it real. And let's think about what cultural inclusivity is and what it is not. Cultural inclusivity is not a holiday bulletin board. It is not a single lesson in February. It is not a token representation. It is not expecting students to shrink to fit within our systems. Now, don't get me wrong, a holiday bulletin board is great. A lesson in February, that's wonderful. But let's dig deeper. Let's get it together. Cultural inclusivity is proactively designing spaces of belonging all year long, not just during the month of February. Cultural inclusivity is valuing lived experiences of all students as assets. Cultural inclusivity is teaching in ways that connect to real life experiences, real world experiences. Cultural inclusivity is reflecting on bias with courage, not shame. Culturally inclusivity is creating classrooms where students don't have to code switch in order to belong. Cultural inclusivity is not about politics, it's about people. Our students need to know this. Our students need to know that they matter. Their voice matters. Their story matters. Students, you are not here to carry adult burdens, and you're not invisible. Your ideas, your questions, your culture, and your experiences are powerful, and they belong in classrooms, they belong in homes, and in community spaces. When students are invited to speak, invited to lead and help shape their own learning, they don't just succeed academically. They begin to see themselves as capable, valued, and worthy of care. They learn that asking for help is not a weakness, it's wisdom. And when families and community members remind students that they are supported on all sides, at school, at home, and beyond, it sends a clear message that our scholars are not doing this by themselves. So, we're getting ready to pause for a quick break. And I want you to take a moment to sit with these questions. Who might be getting lost in the averages? And what can change if we truly listen to their story? I want to leave you with something to reflect on. When we look at our schools, our programs, our outcomes, who looks like they're doing fine on paper, but may actually be struggling in silence? And if we took time to look closer, beyond the averages, beyond the labels, what responsibility would that place on us to respond differently? It's jam packed. When we return from our break, we're going to talk about data and achievement gaps. So you stay put. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back. You're tuned in to Get Life Educational Empowerment here on the Awesome Radio Network at WECU 107.5 FM and 1570 AM. Before we went to break, I asked you to reflect on this. Who might be getting lost in the averages? And what responsibility does that place on us when we choose to look closer? Now, let's talk about why this question matters. Because when we rely on surface level data, we risk mistaking silence for success. We assume that students who are not raising alarm, who are not making noise, are fine, when in reality, they may be navigating barriers that we haven't taken time to see. Those reflective questions point us to a few important truths. First, averages don't tell the whole story. They can hide patterns of struggle, especially for students whose experiences don't match the dominant narrative. Second, when we choose to look closer, when we disaggregate data and listen intentionally, we shift from reacting to problems to proactively preventing problems. And finally, this work asks something from all of us. It challenges educators, families, community members to remove beyond comfort into responsibility, to notice, to question, and to respond with care. So, as we move forward, the goal isn't just to analyze data, it is to see students more clearly and act in ways that ensure that no one is overlooked. So earlier I asked the question, when we look at our schools, our programs, our outcomes, who appears to be doing fine on paper, but they actually may be struggling in silence? But here's the bigger question. Do they really look fine on paper? Because when we slow down and take a closer look, when we stop relying on summaries and really start examining the details, we often realize the warning signs were there all along. They were just buried under the averages. And that's why how we look at data matters just as much as whether we look at it at all. And here's something important to consider. If your school report card does not reflect an A or a B, it doesn't mean failure, and it certainly doesn't mean blame. But what it does mean is that there's information here that's worth exploring. That means that there's a time to really get curious, ask questions. There is an invitation to dig and dive deeper. Where are students doing well? Where are students struggling? Which groups of students are telling a different story once we look a little closer? These reports aren't verdicts, but they're tools. Tools that help us to dig deeper. Tools that help us to identify where supports are working and where adjustments can make a real life difference. When we approach the data with curiosity instead of defensiveness, we open the door to growth. And that is how meaningful improvement begins, by using what we see to do better for our students. Get life big truth is that achievement gaps don't close until belonging gaps close. If we take a pause in understanding the data, here is the truth. Data reveals gaps that tell us where equity is missing. Test scores actually show disparities, sometimes between Black, Hispanics, ELL, and economically disadvantaged students versus white students. Suspensions often disproportionately affect Black students and boys. Gender gaps can exist between math and reading proficiencies. The next time you look at your school data, or the parents, next time you look at your school report card, community members, the next time you look at your district report card grades, I want you to do some notices and wonderings. I want you to notice the scores and data. I want you to ask yourself, what does the data say about our students? What does the data say about my classroom? What does the data say about my district? What does the data say about my community? How can I help? These are some powerful truths that are revealed in the data dives. So let's make sense of the data. Let's really think about why equity matters. Once we look at the data, once we see the numbers of proficiency on discipline, attendance, opportunity, we have to pause and ask a deeper question. What is the data really telling us? Because data isn't just about numbers. Data actually tells a story. And sometimes data reveals truths that we can't ignore. Equity in education means that every child should have access to relevant, challenging academic experiences and the educational resources necessary for success. Success across age, gender, ethnicity, disability, family background, income. Equity is not about treating all students the same. It's about responding intentionally to what data reveals. Equity is not lowering the bar, it's building the ramp. According to Dr. Zaretta Hammond, when we engage in equity work, we focus on multicultural education, social justice education, and culturally responsive education. So, let's talk about how we read the data. When data is aggregated, it means that everything is grouped together, all the totals, all the averages, all the overall numbers. And while that is helpful, it can also hide inequalities. That's why we must disaggregate the data. To disaggregate the data means to break it down by class, by subgroups, by race, by gender, by language, by ability, and by social economic status so that we can see who is thriving and who is being left behind. Remember that data dives are used to reveal how we can be helpful. It's not to blame. When we deep dive into data, disparities are often immersed. Significant gaps in outcomes between groups, such as test scores between Black and white students, or boys and girls, ELL students, white students, any two different groups. Also, disproportionality can be shown. Disproportionality is when certain groups are overrepresented or underrepresented in outcomes like suspensions, special education, or advanced courses. And family, let's be clear, these patterns are not accidental and they're not the fault of the children. So the question now becomes, how do we actually disaggregate the data? I want you to think of disaggregating data like turning on the lights in a classroom. When the lights are off, you can tell that the students are there, but you can't see who's sitting there. You can't see who's raising their hand. You can't see who's quietly struggling in the corner. Disaggregating data flips the switch. So, here's a simpler way to think about it. When you turn the light on, you're able to see everything. Start with one set of data, maybe a benchmark assessment, an attendance report, discipline referrals, or course grades. At the first glance, it tells one story, which is the overall result. But instead of stopping there, we ask a few intentional questions. What happens when we break this data apart by class? What do we notice when we look at it by grade level? What changes when we separate it by race, gender, language status, disability, or economic background? This right here is what it means to disaggregate data. You're not collecting new information, you're just simply reorganizing it so that it can speak to you more clearly. For example, an overall passing rate might look solid, but once you separate the data, you may notice that one group consistently scores lower, or another group is consistently being referred for the same discipline and reactions with higher rates. It's not about labeling students, it's about identifying trends and identifying patterns. Those patterns matter because disaggregated data helps us to move from vague concerns to specific actions. It allows teachers to ask, who needs additional support? Where do instructional strategies need adjustment? Which students are not being served as we think? Again, it's not about blame, it's about clarity. When teachers disaggregate data, they gain power, the power to respond with intention, to advocate with evidence, and to design instruction that meets the needs of all students. So remember, aggregated data tells us what's happening. Disaggregated data helps us to understand for whom it's happening and why. And that's where meaningful change begins. We can data drive our decisions, not assumptions. Ask yourselves, what does the data say to me? What does the data say about race? What does the data say about gender? What does the data say about socioeconomic status? What does it say about language? What does it say about ability? Because when we read data through an equity lens, it stops being about blame and starts being about responsibility. Equity means that we don't look away, we look in, we adjust instruction, we change systems, and we do better on purpose. Culturally responsive instruction. This is where action meets heart because data shows us where we are, and equity tells us what to do next. It builds on what students already know. It shows there's more than one way to learn and succeed. It gives teachers opportunities to learn about students' cultures. It helps students understand behaviors valued in schools. It keeps teaching engaging and inclusive. It identifies hidden biases in our practices. Family, culture inclusivity isn't just a concept, it's a commitment to seeing, valuing, and empowering every child. It's about building schools, homes, and communities. Students don't disengage because of the content being hard. They may disengage because school may feel like a place where they have to shrink themselves or put on a show to hide how they truly feel. They may disengage because they feel like they have to wear a mask in order to fit in. But at Get Life, we don't shrink students. We don't mask feelings. We expand systems. And we're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to talk about a new shift in education that you really want to take part in. We'll be right back. I am so glad that you are tuned in to Get Life Educational Empowerment here on the Awesome Radio Network. I am your host, Sherida Suggs, and we are going to deep dive right into cultural inclusivity, school, family, and community. And we're going to talk about what it really is and how it lives in our schools. At its heart, cultural inclusivity is about honoring the whole person, not expecting students to fit into one mold. It's the understanding that students don't need to become someone else to succeed. Schools, families, and communities must create spaces where who they already are is valued and celebrated. When we practice cultural inclusivity, we embrace diversity. which is recognizing the many different cultures, languages, experiences, and perspectives that live in our schools and communities. We embrace culture, which is understanding that every child carries a unique cultural lens that shapes how they learn, how they communicate, and connect. Pedagogy, which is where we are headed. It's about designing instruction in ways that reflect students' lives and their strengths rather than trying to erase them. Equality versus equity. Equality gives everyone the same thing. Equity gives every student what they need to thrive, honoring their differences. Culturally relevant teaching is using students' experiences to make learning meaningful. Culturally sustaining practices is going a step further to actively preserve and celebrate students, their cultural identities, while helping them to thrive academically. Social justice education is teaching students not only content, but also how to recognize challenge and dismantle inequities in society. Multicultural education is integrating histories, perspectives, and contributions from all cultural views so that groups and no voice is left out. So, there is a new paradigm in education, and it helps us to shift how we think. Family, one huge thing that we are experiencing right now in education is not just a change in program or policies, it's a paradigm shift. It's a shift in how we see students, how we define success, and how we understand culture in learning spaces. Educators and thought leaders like Belinda Williams reminds us that this new era of education requires us to unlearn some old ways of thinking. For too long, schools have operated in a deficit mindset, asking what's missing or what's wrong with the students. The new paradigm asks a different question. It asks, what strength does the student bring to the table, and how can we build from there? Cultural inclusivity demands that we move away from the idea that students must fit into our cultural mold. Instead, we create a school culture that helps students to be flexible. It helps students to be responsive and inclusive of each other. And it brings us to voices that have shaped this shift, voices that have challenged us to rethink not just policy, but practice and mindsets. One such voice is Belinda Williams, a respected cognitive psychologist and education researcher has helped educators see the whole world, not just the test scores. Dr. Williams has spent more than 3 decades studying how culture, context, and environment affects how students learn and achieve. She's held senior research and development roles within universities and regional education labs. And her writing has opened doors for schools to move beyond deficit thinking toward believing that every student's potential helps them to succeed. It's not abstract theory. It's grounded in real classrooms and real communities. She reminds us that when we stop asking, what's wrong with this kid? Instead, ask about their strengths and what they bring and how can we build from there, then we unlock deeper learning and greater equity for all. Her work has helped to fuel this era of education, one that requires us to examine our own assumptions, to honor student identities, and broaden what we call success. She speaks to the importance of shifting from compliance based education to connection based education, where relationships, relevance, and respect are foundational. In this paradigm, culture is not an add on, it is essential. Differences are not disruptions, they are assets. Students are not problems to be managed, they are partners in learning. This shift challenges educators, families, and communities to examine how our beliefs shape our practice. Because before we change instruction, discipline, or curriculum, we must change our mindset. Culturally inclusivity is about being proactive. It's about creating environments where students experience belonging before they experience expectations. In this new paradigm, we teach the whole child. We honor lived experiences. We design learning with culture in mind from start to finish, not as an afterthought. This is the work of transformational education, and it calls all of us in, not just the teachers, not just administrators, but families, communities, and even our students, as well as the systems working together to ensure that every child feels seen, valued, and capable. Because when we change how we think about students, we change how we teach them. And when we change how we teach them, we change outcomes. Family, this new paradigm in education, the one leaders like Belinda Williams speaks to, it's not just theoretical. It shows up in how we teach, how we respond, how we treat, and what we choose to see in our students. This instructional heartbeat is something called asset-based pedagogy. So, here is a Get Life Principles principle. Asset-based pedagogy is what happens when cultural inclusivity moves from beliefs to practice. Remember the young man that we talked about in our last segment during our story time? The one with the sagging pants, the dreadlocks? If we had only punished him or excluded him, we would have lost the chance to tap into his natural leadership, his natural humor, and care for others. Instead, by including him, we used his strengths to build stronger classroom culture. Cultural inclusivity and asset-based pedagogy is about taking what's already there, the child's identity, culture, background, gifts, and weaving into the fabric of the school, the home, and the community. And when we do that consistently, we don't just educate children, we empower communities. You see, asset-based pedagogy is it's a transformational aspect. Instead of asking what skills are missing, what deficits does the student have, we ask about the strengths that are already there. We practice what centers those strengths, the strengths of all students, and intentionally value diversity in culture, language, identity, and lived experiences. It recognizes that students come to school with knowledge, skills, resilience, and creativity, as well as brilliance, even if those strengths don't always look traditional. This is where cultural inclusivity becomes real. In this paradigm, a student's language is not correct at first, it's understood. A student's behavior is not immediately punished, but it's interpreted. Remember how we said that a student's behavior is also a way a student communicates. So when a student communicates with you, you need to listen and interpret. A student's culture is not ignored, it's leveraged for learning. Asset-based pedagogy aligns directly with culturally responsive education. It allows educators to build on what students already know, create multiple pathways to learning, validate students' identities while maintaining high expectations. This approach does not lower the bar, it widens the pathway. When we teach through an asset-based lens, we stop asking students to minimize themselves. Instead, we create classrooms where who they are becomes part of how they succeed. And family, this is how paradigm shifts begin, not through slogans, but through daily decisions. in classroom, homes, and communities. When we change the lens, we change the learning. When we honor assets, we unlock achievements. So when we shift to asset-based pedagogy, this is teaching through the lens of students' strengths. It's about valuing diversity in culture, language, and ability. It's about using what students already know to help them grow. It's about creating classrooms where students are welcome, they feel seen, valued, and included. When students believe that the school is for them, not against them, they invest in their own learning. Cultural inclusivity practices disrupt the pipeline from school to prison. The pipeline doesn't start in prison. It starts with missed instructional time. It starts with repeated discipline. It starts with feeling misunderstood. It starts with feeling unwanted and unwelcome. Culturally, inclusivity interrupts that cycle by shifting the question from what rule was broken to what does this student need to stay connected. Research shows that restorative, inclusive environments reduce repeat discipline offenses and improves long-term outcomes, especially for students historically pushed through the margins. And let's be clear, this isn't about being soft. It's not about excusing behavior, but it's about being strategic. High expectations plus culturally inclusivity equals student success. Culturally inclusive schools do not lower the standards. They find creative ways to raise access to the standards. They say, we will hold you accountable. They say, we will support you. That combination is powerful. So when we talk about cultural inclusivity, we're talking about keeping students in classrooms. We're talking about keeping students engaged in learning. We're talking about keeping students connected to hope and possibility. And family, that's how pipelines are dismantled, not with punishment, but with purposeful inclusion. The Get Life Principles principle is cultural inclusivity doesn't exclude behavior, it explains it, it interprets it, it addresses it, and it transforms it. Family, this conversation can't end with the sound of my voice. Cultural inclusivity is not a theory, it is a daily practice. So, as we think about students, educators, families, and community leaders, here's where we can go forward. Students, I want you to understand to believe in your own strengths, in your own voice. Know that you are capable of learning and growing every single day. Ask for support when you need it. It's not a weakness, it's a sign of wisdom. Share your ideas and experiences. They matter and they deserve to be heard. Respectfully, take ownership of your learning. It is your responsibility to learn. But remember, you don't have to do it all alone. Step into opportunities to lead, explore, and grow. Trust that your potential is visible even when it feels hidden. Repeat these words to yourself. I am capable. My voice matters. I have the strength to ask for help and seek support. Because when you carry these truths, you not only lift yourself, you lift your whole classroom and community with you. Remember, you are our future. We are depending on you, just like you're depending on us now. And remember, we're better together and we're stronger together. To our educators, see your students through an asset-based lens. Notice the strength that each child brings into the classroom. Teach with intention, letting every lesson and interaction have purpose. Use data to inform your choices, not to label, not to limit a student's potential. Build relationships before rigor. Take time to learn and understand your students. Give the students time to understand and learn who you are, because you too are important. You too are valuable. You too come with a background that matters. Ask yourself, who am I intentionally including? Whose voice am I amplifying? What system am I willing to change? Remember that change does start with you, because inclusion doesn't happen by accident. It happens on purpose and it occurs with purpose. Remember and affirm. I can see each student's strengths. I teach with purpose. I make interaction meaningful. To our families and community members, your voice matters, your culture matters. Partner with schools boldly and unapologetically. Advocate not only for what your child is offered, but for what they truly need to thrive. Let us take a moment to pause and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for these students that we teach, these students that we grow. We acknowledge our parents, we acknowledge our educators, our community leaders. We thank you for them, and we lift them up in prayer that they can match each student with intention, that they can see the potential in every child and build relationships rooted in trust, respect, and care. Help us to honor families. Help us to honor families whose voices inspire us. We honor our community members whose presence creates spaces of belonging. And we thank you that together we all remember that we have strengths, we listen deeply, and we act with intention. Father, that we are building a future of equity, possibility, and hope together. And it is your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. And it is so. As we carry today's message forward, let's remember these key truths. See each child beyond behavior. Honor culture as a strength. Lead with empathy and inclusion. Build spaces where everyone belongs. This, friend, is the essence of Get Life. Together we can bridge gaps, amplify positive voices, and create futures where every student thrives. So, stay inspired, stay empowered, and always remember, Get Life. Because when we commit to this work together, we are not just shaping classrooms, we are shaping futures. I am Sherida Suggs, and this has been Get Life Educational Empowerment on the Awesome Radio Network. I invite you to tune in every Tuesday from 3 to 4 p.m. as we explore real experiences from today's schools, families, and communities. Until next time, now and forever, let's get it together. Live in full expectancy. Let's empower education.